COVID has changed that for us, so this is a perfect platform for us to adapt and try something new. And the goal of these events were to encourage grower-to-grower dialogue about improving soil health practices on the Palouse, from low disturbance farming practices, maintaining residue cover, adopting cover crops or companion crops, and then introducing innovative methods of farming. And it's meant to have a time for conversation and have that collaboration process. And attendees have noted that it was important that this platform existed as a source of information and conversation with neighbors about different things they are trying, so they can continue thinking outside the box, being innovative, and coming up with new solutions for the challenges we're facing now in agriculture. And we're hoping to get back to an in-person platform as soon as we're able, but for the time being, we're offering this 4-part series through February at the same time. So we hope you guys will continue to join us this winter. All our sessions are being recorded and they'll be posted on the Palouse Conservation District website. Recordings from last year's Alternative Cropping Symposium and other soil health resources can be found on our website as well. So please head there. You can do www.palousecd.org or search for Palouse Conservation District in Google. Just a quick shout out to all of our generous supporters for this program. So in previous years, funding was provided through Washington State Soil Health Committee, and they were the foundation for us to develop an opportunity for growers to share in conversation. Recently awarded funding through Washington Department of Ecology has allowed us to continue this programming, and we hope we can continue this opportunity for growers both virtually and in person. And many of the other sponsors listed here have supported us throughout the years, both financially and by helping us get the word out. Our sponsors this year have donated financially, as well as donated many of the raffle gifts that will be given away during this series. Today, we'll be raffling off a gift certificate valued at $50 from Green Cover Seed and a gift certificate valued at $50 from Plants of the Wild. And to be eligible for the raffle, you will need to be present at the end of the presentation today. And we just have a few there, and some other shout outs: Green Cover Seed out of Nebraska, Plants of the Wild out of Tico, Shepherd's Grain, a consortium of farmers and operators. Roots of Resilience works with Northwest farmers on holistic management practices. Spectrum Crop Development is a crop development protection agency out of Ritzville. And Washington State Department of Ag supports our efforts with their soil health initiative. And then finally, Spokane Community College has been a great supporter of ours over the years. They are currently offering an online one-year gift certificate program in ag business, along with a bunch of other online ag business courses. So check them out if you're interested. So now we will get down to the meat of the program today. So our first, our first speaker is Dr. Isaac Madsen out of Washington State University. And Isaac will be talking about alternative production systems on the Palouse, integrating livestock and canola and intercropping canola and peas. Isaac Madsen is the oilseeds cropping systems agronomist at Washington State. His research focuses on improving the production and sustainability of oilseed cropping systems in Washington State. He has worked on soil fertility, stand establishment, and winter survival in canola. Additionally, he works on alternative production practices, including intercropping and grazing. So we'll go ahead and see if we can have Isaac go ahead and share his screen. Perfect. So Isaac, we see you. Fabulous.
Do you see the presentation now?
We can see you. Let's see the presentation and hear you. Yep, looks great.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for having me on here, and it's good to see a lot of familiar names on the list of attendees. And I hope this is a useful little talk this morning. So, and one of the joys of COVID is that I work in my garage, so I apologize for the backdrop. I kind of changed the title up a little bit last minute, and I think this is maybe the way we need to be thinking about this is how we increase biodiversity while increasing crop production in our region. So I'm going to start with two assumptions about soil health, and you can debate these if you want, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'll just be sticking with these assumptions. So basically, crop diversity is beneficial for long-term soil health, and then increasing the time during which plants are actively rooting is beneficial for long-term soil health. So those are two assumptions that I'll make and that I'll stick with throughout the presentation. Well, to dive right into it, the first practice, so I'm going to be talking about two practices, Piola, which is the pea canola intercropping, and then canolage, which is grazing canola. And to dive right in, we'll start talking about Piola. And this is a little cartoon I drew up, just highlighting some of the differences in these plants. So on the left here, we have my version of a pea plant. We know it's a slightly shallower rooted. It also has the little nodules here. And those nodules, right, fix nitrogen. That's what most legumes are most well known for. Another factor with legumes is they are an AMF colonizing plant. So that means they have the arbuscomycorrhizae fungi, which extends the root system essentially into the soil. And so you can get you can get away with a smaller root system, and it will explore the soil further and build surface area, which improves uptake of nutrients, especially nutrients like phosphorus and zinc, and then it can also increase your water uptake. We go over to canola on the right here, tap-rooted, deep roots. Even though it is tap-rooted, you end up with a lot of fine roots, and it does not have AMF or rhizobium associated with it. So the way that canola kind of compensates for that is by going deep quickly, right? So it accesses nutrients further down in the profile, and then we combined the two different crops, and you get this. They're filling out the niches. So the peas take up more in the surface soil. The canola hopefully takes up more in the subsoil. And then we get the benefits of having these different microbial populations. So this is just another scale to look at that. This is some root pictures we did in the lab. So here we have our pea root growing down through the soil. We have a nodule from the pea there that's growing. And then we have our canola root that's coming through from the left here. One thing you can notice right away is how long the canola root hairs are. So these are the root hairs off the canola. The pea root hairs are very short. They only come out about this far. And so that's a sort of a biological way that the canola compensates for having no AMF associated with it. And then we have all of these interactions that we don't know what's happening here. So that's sort of one of the black boxes of research to look at in the future. When I first started hearing about Piola, I was a little bit skeptical about it, whether it could ever be done at scale. And so I took a little trip to Canada in 2019 and looked at it being done at scale. So this field is a few hundred acres, and you can see this is a pea canola lentil mix actually. So here's some canola and here's some canola. And they said they had a little bit more trouble getting the canola out that year, stand established. But that trip to Canada was really big for me in actually convincing me that you could see this sort of practice implemented on a large acreage, and that it wouldn't be necessarily just a niche small acreage practice. And then digging roots up in the field, it was fun to see a lot of what we had seen in the lab, and this is switching over to a different intercrop on the same farm. This is a lentil camelina intercrop. And here's some of the nodules right here off of the lentil. This is a lentil plant. This is the camelina plant. And you can see those root systems are just growing right in with each other. And so even if there isn't direct transfer of nutrients from one plant to the other, you can imagine there's some sharing going on in that instance. So I want to talk really quickly about how we evaluate these systems. This is what's called the land equivalence ratio, and it's basically a way for comparing intercrops to monocultures. So this is the only equation. I know nobody should be subjugated to equations at 7 in the morning, but this is the only equation I'll have here. Basically what you do is you take your intercrop yield of crop A, so in our instance that would be canola, and you divide it by the monoculture yield of crop A, so by canola yield in a monoculture, and you do the same thing with your pea, so intercropping of pea and monoculture of pea. And so, right, usually when we grow crops in intercrop, what we find is that leads to a yield decrease, right? There's some competition going on, so it leads to yield decrease for the individual plants, but on a whole, you end up with an over yielding effect. And that's been shown in research both in Canada and in Australia, where they've probably done the most work on at least brassica legume intercrops, which is sort of my focus. So I want to spend the rest of our time talking about the experiments that we've done here. So the first year, starting in the fall of 2019, I planted Ralston, Davenport, and Ralston was a really important lesson, and I think something that we're going to need to learn from in the future and really brainstorm about. The peas came up fine. We planted a little later because we were trying to plant late enough so that we didn't get peas flowering in the fall. Because of that later planting date, we ended up with the winter peas actually dying out. I mean, the winter canola not emerging, sorry. And the winter peas made it through fine, but then we had no winter canola, and so we scrapped that experiment. We did try and get spring canola to come up, but the spring canola didn't come up, so we seeded spring canola. I think it was probably a bit late this spring, maybe April. And then Davenport, and this is the first successful winter canola, winter pea study. It was fall sown last fall in 2019, and so I'll show you the data from that. So that was a successful experiment. And then we also had an experiment out of Colfax. This was on John and Corey Ashelman's land. They were kind enough to actually plant this experiment for me. So they did it with their cross slot drill. And we decided to use, it was spring sown, but we decided to use winter peas. I was a little bit afraid of the spring peas outrunning the spring canola and dominating that mixture. And so we went with using winter peas, and in hindsight, that was probably a mistake because the peas didn't do super well in that. Neither did the canola, but we can look at the yield data from that and talk about that a bit. So just to show you a picture of what winter Piola might look like. So this is at Davenport. I think this flag's about 5 feet tall, and this is the canola is already potted out. You can see, so it's already set all of its pods. The peas come on a bit later, and they tend to climb up the canola, which is part of the idea right here, is that we effectively make a sort of a lattice for the peas to climb up, so the peas aren't laying on the ground. They can grow right up the canola, and that was kind of cool to see the peas climbing at the top of that there. So another picture, and this is from the winter pea and spring canola plots, and so you can see the winter pea down here at the bottom, and then the canola up at the top. I used a Dynagrow Clearfield canola. I use Clearfield because while it's a bit off label, the Amazamox works on both will work on both peas and canola, and so that was my reasoning there was to use that. So I used Beyond for that and sprayed it on a research license. And then over here is plants I dug up there where we have the canola roots and then the pea nodules, and that was really fun to see. The same stuff I'd seen in Canada, but I'm now seeing it at our experiments down on the Palouse. So this is the yield data, and I know there's a lot of numbers on here, but I'll just take my time and work through it slowly. So you can see over on the very left column, we have location, so Colfax, Davenport. Then the next column over is crop system, so it's canola, pea, or Piola. And then we have nitrogen rate. So that Davenport study, we also varied the nitrogen rate. So at Colfax, we have the canola here at 90 pounds, and then the pea at 0, and then the Piola at 45 pounds. So we decided to cut the N rate in half when we did that Piola. Davenport, our canola control was 60 pounds of N, and our pea was 0 pounds of N. And then we had Piola at 0 pounds of N, 30 pounds of N, and 60 pounds of N. And I don't know quite what to do with some of these results. Overall, the yields were fairly low, well, really low, really, for spring canola near Colfax, in my opinion. I would hope to get above 2,000 pounds, especially on this last year. It was such a great canola year. I don't know if that was that variety I chose, that clear field. Maybe it's not a variety that's done super well around here, and I was just trying to find something that was clear field, and most of our spring canola seed we had on hand was Roundup Ready. So I think that might have been the issue here. And then you can see peas yielding on their own is in this column. So this is the canola yield, the pea yield, and then this is that land equivalence ratio. So you can think of that land equivalence ratio as, you can almost look at it as this would be 100%. So any of the monocultures will be 100% because that's what's used to calculate the baseline. And then this Piola here at Colfax, even though the yields are really low, actually was 138% of the monocultures. So when you add that up, and that's mostly due to that over yielding in canola. And then when we look at the Davenport location here, you can see our monoculture winter canola 1960. So once again, not an excellent yield for that area. I would have been, closer to 3,000 pounds would have been a nicer number to be seeing for that. And then these are the calculations there of the of the LERs for those. And so one of the really odd things that I haven't quite figured out is why canola yield was going down with increasing nitrogen, right? You would expect the reverse to happen, but this 0N LER has the highest, so that's 1.65. So that was the highest yielding when you combine them, was that zero nitrogen treatment. And then that Davenport treatment here, basically the higher nitrogens had lower LERs, but it was not significant. So there was not a fertility effect in this one, but there was a cropping system effect. In fact, the cropping system affected canola, pea yield, and LER significantly across this table. And then we saw some nitrogen rate effects in canola, but we saw actually a decrease, which is very odd. And we're obviously going to keep running this into future years and future locations. So that's not the end of the story. And then there's something with the pea yields that I haven't delved into, a location by cropping system effect, and that's most likely, I think, to this due to the decline in massive decline in pea yields here at Colfax. Looking at the overall, so this is combining the locations. This is the average LER of Piola was 1.46, and that was a significant effect. This is another way to essentially visualize the same data, but this would be our 100% LER line, and this is not just looking at the averages now. This is looking at all the individual data points, and you can see here we do have some of these plots that are coming in below, but like I showed in the statistics, it is significantly higher when we do the when we have the sorry, it's significantly higher than the LER of 1 when we look at the stats on all the Piola. So here's the different N rates. They don't really filter themselves out. So the way you look at this is if it's to the left of the line, it means it was favoring pea production. If the right of the line, it's favoring canola production. So you can use plots like this to basically evaluate, you know, if your practice is going to favor more canola production or more pea production. And in the current economic state, I think we definitely want to favor canola production. So I was kind of happy to see it drifting that way. You can definitely control this somewhat with seeding rate and plant density, which way this is going to drift. If we look at it by fall versus spring planted, so if you remember that canola in the spring planted actually, or in the peel actually out yielded the spring planted monoculture canola, and so that's why we have that kind of extreme drift here over to the canola side of the equation when we're looking at the spring, and then fall's kind of scattered all over the place. Looking at what they're finding in Australia and Canada, I would say that they are ending up in this 1.5 region with outliers sometimes getting close to 2, but those are really the outliers. And so I think that 1.5, so 150% is really what we're looking at when we're trying to think about making this work economically and the logistics of it. Looking at LER over nitrogen application, really, this is that very odd interaction where, and you can see that the data is pretty widely scattered, so you can't regress anything across here. But it does seem that like there was a decrease this year, and that could just be basically due to these outliers here. So this plot did get, you know, above 2, so that's almost 250% yield with this individual plot here. One more thing I want to talk about with Piola is we sampled insects in Colfax, and I did this with an entomology team from David Crowder's lab. We have, this is the total beneficial insects in the canola, the peas, and the Piola. So you can see there's quite a few more in the Piola. I don't know if they actually ran stats on this. This is a graph that the entomologist gave me, but that was kind of exciting to see that there's something going on with the insects there. When we switch over to here, this is herbivores. So this would be, you could kind of think of this as your bad guys. So canola, Piola, and then the peas had a lot more than the Piola intercrop, which is interesting. Some of that could be due to sampling issues. It's kind of hard to sample. The peas didn't come fully up in this system to the top of the canola, and so maybe we were missing some there. If we do this again, we're going to try and use a giant vacuum sampler, which is something they do in entomology. They just try and suck all the insects off. For this, we use sweep nets. Future challenges, I think this establishment is going to be a big one. You know, canola, we want to seed early and shallow. Peas, we want to seed late and deep. And those two things sort of conflict. And so I think working out the planting timing that's right and the depth that's right is going to be one of the trickier things, especially in the winter system. Spring, I think spring Piola, you won't have the same issue, but I'm really interested in winter Piola right now. And I'm hoping to do some spring Piola too, but the funding I have is for winter Piola at this time. And then harvest and seed separation are always concerns. And then also weed control. Like I said, I did some off-label applications for this because we're able to do that under a research license. But that's something we would need to think about in the future. So Imazamax, right, and beyond can be sprayed on peas, or it's labeled to spray on canola. And then I forget the trade name, but there's another Imazamax that's sprayed on peas. And so they're effectively the same chemistry, but they're not labeled. So I never recommend off-label spraying. We do a little bit in research, but I think moving forward, this is something we're going to have to consider. Obviously, you have all your grassy herbicides. And then the growers I talked to in Canada, they said that overall this system has really drastically reduced their herbicide and fertilizer use because of the increased competition. And that's one of the things that I noticed that really got me interested in this to start with, is that the peas, or that when I drove by winter pea fields, I seemed to see a lot of mustard as a weed in there. And I was like, well, maybe we should just fill that ecological niche with canola. Okay, I only have a few minutes left, so I want to talk about dual purpose canola, which we're calling canolage. if you just, it's canola and forage right together. The idea behind this is that we extend our growing season in the grain fallow region. So we have winter. Traditionally, right, we would plant our winter wheat. It would go through winter. We would harvest the following summer, maybe earlier than this. The timeline is not exact, but the idea is that we would seed earlier. So the first week of July would be kind of the ideal seeding date. Graze sometime in September, and then take it through to harvest. And so the idea being that we would pick up at least a month, maybe in some instances 2 months of extra active root growth. And we've done this at 2 locations successfully. So we did it at Dusty in 2018 to 2019, and we got some decent yields there in Dusty. So that's these are the yields from that. So ungrazed was 3,384, and then the pasture, depending on the grazing severity, was anywhere between 3,000 pounds, 3,300 pounds and 2,100 pounds. And then Creston did it this last year, 2019 to 2020. Grazed was definitely hit somewhat and basically lost 1,000 pounds of yield. So I think really, if you're looking at this production practice, you need to be, really looking at it from extending your forage standpoint and getting a bonus yield on the side. One thing to note here is that in this Creston year, we did plant the canola with oats, which we found improves the feed quality a little bit. It decreases the amount of total nitrates and increases the fiber in the forage. So that's good. But it might be actually dinging our yield a little bit. And we also use different varieties. So this wasn't a direct comparison. In the graze, we had Griffin, which was originally bred for grazing. I don't know if I'll use it again. That was out of K-State. And then ungrazed was Claremore, which is pretty locally adapted. And obviously that's what's sold by Spectrum Seed Development around here, or one of their really popular varieties. And that's all I have. I hope I'm in time, Jody. So thanks to Walks, they pay my bills, which allows me to do a lot of fun work on not just conventional cropping systems, and then in WSU, who's who I work for. So thank you everybody for showing up, and I see there's questions in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac. That was great. Really interesting to hear that. So we do have a few questions. Yeah, if you want to take a few minutes to go through some of these. And if anybody else has additional questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat box here. But if we could probably take about 5 minutes to answer, Isaac.
Yeah, so some reason I hid my chat box. There it is.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, no worries. It's hard to see on the Zoom. Yeah, it might be easier too if you stop sharing your screen.
Okay, yeah, I got it now. Okay. So Carol asked, is there any evidence for allelopathy from the canola? I don't think there is. I think the rotational dings we see with canola sometimes, I think are more due to, our best guess is they're actually due to starving the soil of AMF, because you take, you don't have a host for the mycorrhizae for a year. And so I think when we're seeing those effects that people, I think, more or less used to think were allelopathy, what we're actually seeing is an effect of a decreased microbiome in the soil. And so by adding the P's in, my hope is to counter that. I certainly didn't see anything that looked like allelopathy. The plants grow really close to each other and seem to love it. The only evidence I've seen of anything like that, and I don't think it was allelopathy, is a canola root that got really close to a nodule once rotted. And I think it was just because there was too much nutrients there. So I think probably just too much of a good thing. And Jason asked, what do the Canadians do for fertility? So some of them were actually at 0 on nitrogen. I think they're using micros and probably still potassium up there and phosphorus, but they were definitely aiming for a 0 nitrogen input on that. And then the graze plots, Amy, that was that last stuff I showed. So monoculture in Dusty, and then the oat canola intercrop in in Creston. And then I will say we tried again in Dusty. So that would have been 2019, 2020. And we planted in May. We got really greedy on our plantings then. And we were trying to get 2 grazings off, and we'd routed the crop out. So there is an early limit. The funny thing about that was the only part of that trial we ended up harvesting was the part that the cows were basically walking in and out of every day, so the highest traffic area, and that slowed the transpiration down enough for the plants that the plants actually did survive winter, and we harvested them the next year. But it was this year is like 700 pounds. So there's an early end. You can go too early and end up effectively droughting your crop out, and you can graze too late and end up damaging it also.
Nice. And then it looks like we have one last question. Carol asked there, when seeding, did you say if it was one pass for each seed type?
Yeah, so these were both one pass systems. So at Colfax, that was in the Ashman's cross slot, they have a dry box on there. And so we just threw the peas straight into the dry box, and they had been seeding canola. So we left the canola in the in the main seed box. And then when I seeded the research trials up at Davenport, those were small plot. I have a double disc drill that allows me to set a deep band. And so similar, I put the peas in the deep band, and then I put the canola in the shallow band. I think something I'd like to see done with is somebody with a hoe type winged opener, put the canola out the wings and the peas down the center. I think that might be a good solution. I don't have one of those at my disposal, but I think that would be a possible approach to getting the peas to emerge more slowly, really sink them deep, and then getting the canola just barely into moisture.
Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, that's probably all the time we have this morning. We do have Isaac's contact information on our website. So if you have further questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to him. And Isaac, thank you so much for spending the morning with us and sharing this research. And yeah, pretty exciting stuff. So,
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing here.
Awesome. All right. Fabulous. All right, so we're going to move into the second presenter today. Jakin Berns, he is from Green Cover out of Nebraska, and he is going to be talking about creating custom cover crop mixes with our SmartMix Calculator. Some of you may be familiar with this already, and others this might be new. So he's going to go through it here with us. And just a quick bio on Jakin. Jakin grew up on his family farm in South Central Nebraska, where his love for soil began from an early age. Eventually, that manifested itself into an ag business degree, which led to a full-time sales and education position with Green Cover Seed. And he's very passionate about the benefits of cover crops and soil health, and thinks it's key to healthier communities and more resilient, profitable farms. So Jakin, let's see if we can try to get you to share your screen.
See. Share. Can you see my screen now?
We can. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. And you can hear me well?
We can hear you great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be here this morning. I just want to give a huge shout out to you, Jody, and the Palouse Conservation District for making this all happen. So it's good to be here, and I'm honored to be part of the conversation. And I'm always in favor of promoting healthy soils and profitable farming as well. So with that, I'm eager to get started. My name is Jakin Berns, and I have the pleasure of working with Green Cover Seed. And my role within Green Cover Seed is sales and education, and that's kind of centered around cover crops and soil health. And so one of the things we think we do best at Green Cover Seed is provide farmers with custom cover crop mixes. So we sell to all 50 states, and our main location is in Bladen, Nebraska. And then we also have locations now in Kansas and Oklahoma. And so one thing that we think sets us apart from other cover crop providers is our SmartMix Calculator tool. And that's kind of what we're going to focus in on today. And we'll discuss what makes a cover crop mix smart and how to go about designing that smart mix or that smart cover crop mix. So yeah, kind of what I would like to do is start this morning by talking a little bit about what I think or what we think makes a cover crop mix smart. And we call this tool the SmartMix, or this calculator or tool, the SmartMix. But why is that, and what exactly is a SmartMix? Well, I thought we could even look at SMART as an acronym, SMART. So specific, is it measurable, is it achievable, realistic, and timely. So first is specific, and with cover crops, as with most things in life, there isn't really a silver bullet or a one size fits all. And so a successful mix in your area with your goals might look quite a bit different than a successful mix in my area with my goals, just because of all the variances there might be. So we think in order to have a smart mix, it has to have clear and specific goals. And then, so if your goal is to simply just go out there this year and get something planted, well, you could accomplish that with just about anything. But if you have more specific goals of grazing and weed suppression, then you might not be able to accomplish that goal by just planting anything. So setting your goals is important. And once you know that, we believe that the smart mix can be very, very helpful. And then measurable would kind of go along with that too. We can kind of come back to our goals of weed suppression and grazing and ask yourself, is there less weeds because of this cover crop, or did I get as much forage out of this cover crop as I had hoped for? And that kind of brings it back to kind of measuring that success. And then also next is achievable and realistic. And I kind of think those things go hand in hand together. And so obviously you want something that's going to be achievable, right? And a great way to do this is learning from others. Maybe that's through resources like this today, or other cover crop experts out there like Gabe Brown and Ray Archuleta and those guys, see what they're doing. And then maybe even more importantly, or maybe more impactful, is finding local and regional experts as well. People that are kind of more attuned to your area, maybe have similar mindset. And so that kind of brings in some of the variables of different locations and stuff too. Maybe you had a neighbor try planting some, turnips or radish last fall, and you kind of saw how that did. And, you think you might want to do that as well. And then lastly is timely. And this one is big. It's been said before that timing is everything when it comes to cover crops. What time of year are you planting? What are the soil temps during that growing period of that cover crop mix? And when is the last, or frost dates and things like that. And so with those things in mind, let's just kind of dive deeper into the smart mix. So I'll click out of this here. And I actually am going to start at our Green Cover Seed website, and this will link us to the smart mix. And so there's a link up here at top, or even in the middle of the screen here, that says start mixing. And so that'll take us to smartmix.greencoverseed.com. And then from there, you'll need to log in. And if you haven't created an account, you'll need to do so, but that's a pretty simple and easy process to do. And it's also free. So there's no cost for you to use the SmartMix tool. And so once you're logged in, you're kind of here at the home page. Let's see here. And then, all we want to do is click on Start a Mix. That's where we want to be. And so once we click on Start a Mix, it brings us to step 1. And we'll continue on and go through steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then on to completion. And so here on step 1, really what this tool is going to do is rank and score different species based on our geography, our next cash crop, our seeding and termination dates, and then our goals. And so that's kind of the 4 things: the geography, cash crop, next seeding date, and your goals. And so with kind of those 4 things in mind, that's kind of what we're going to do here in this step 1. So first, let's kind of just set the stage of this mix. So we can just kind of say, I guess I already had that in there, spring grazing 2021. So maybe in this example this morning, we're just going to have a piece of land for next spring that we're going to have to try to plant a cover crop for our cattle to graze on. And then we'll want to click on our acres, and we'll just say 50 acres, for example. And then let's move over to zip code here. And so actually up top here, it says hello Bladen, Nebraska. And then it gives us our rainfall of about 27 inches of rain per year. but I can easily change this. So if I wanted to change this to 99163, now it pulls up Pullman, Washington, with a rainfall of closer to 20 inches annual. And then it gives us some first frost date info and plant hardiness zone as well. And so that's a nice feature to kind of update that on the go. And then the irrigated inches boxes is a nice feature, not only if you have an irrigation method, but if you don't, and you think it's going to be a wetter than normal spring, you can add in 5 inches, and it kind of calculates that into the kind of calculations to kind of add into that growing period, 5 inches of rainfall. Or you can even go, on the other hand, into the negative and just do -5 inches or 10 inches if you think it's going to be a very dry period. So it brings up the 20 inches and it knows the timing of your mix, but you can kind of tell it, you know, what you think this year is going to be different. So that's kind of a nice feature, but we'll leave that alone for now. And then we'll want to go through the bagging option. There's 50-pound bags, tote bag, or a kind of a bulk truck option. So for the sake of transparency, we'll do 50-pound bags because there is a little bit of an extra cost there. And then is it certified organic? We'll say no. And then we'll come up here to seeding method. And so there's drilled, broadcast, and then broadcast with incorporation. Typically with cover crops, drilling is the preferred method. And so that's probably what we'll click on today. But we have seen a lot of success with broadcast and broadcast with incorporation. Typically, we would just recommend sometimes smaller seeds and especially a higher planting rate, increase of around 30% or something like that for a broadcast. So we'll just say drilled. And then next, cash crop. There's a lot of different options here, and we're trying to add some more as we go. But there's, corn and soybeans and all of those. And then there's also, canola is here and different things like that. And so even if you don't have a next cash crop, we can just click on, other warm season grass. Say, for example, our piece of land this year, we really just want to focus on building the soil and getting something out there to feed our cattle. And so after the spring grazing mix, maybe we want to go with a summer grazing mix in the summer to provide even more forage for the cattle. So we can just say other warm season grass, and the calculator will kind of take that into account along with our goals that we'll put in a second here. Okay, and then seeding date, it puts us at today, but obviously we're not going to plant this mix today. So we'll click on till next spring, maybe say April 2nd, whichever date you think might be close to when you're planting. And then we can put termination date, kind of the middle of June, and we could always edit that later as well. And then lastly, on step 1 is the goals down here. Now we can either have 1, 2, or 3 of these goals. And so it starts with the highest priority. And there's quite a few options here as well. Increase organic matter, nitrogen fixation, on down the line. We're looking to add more of these as well, but there's even, nematode control and deer habitat. But since we decided this is a spring grazing mix, we'll just go ahead and say, if I can find that again, supplemental grazing is our main goal. And then we decided we want to improve the soil as well. So for our second goal, we can click increase soil organic matter. And then we could leave this one blank, or maybe we want to control the weeds a little bit. So we'll say weed suppression. And then that's kind of it for step 1. And we can get going into step 2, which is really kind of the fun part, because this is where we can start creating our mix and adding species in. But before we do that, I want to point out a couple things first. There's kind of the summary box on the right side here. And this is a summary of everything we did in step 1. It's got the name of our mix, it's got our acres and our location, and then our bagging and so on and so forth. And then underneath species, it's got 0 pounds per acre, just because we haven't added anything. And then underneath the cost, it's got 0 as well. But as we begin to add species, these numbers will begin to populate in real time. And so then you'll be able to kind of add and change the poundage and stuff and see how these numbers change as far as the planting rate and cost per pound and cost per acre. So we'll take a look at that in a second. And then we can also track our goals progress with our grazing here, and we'll want to see our grazing, maybe even 100%, at least 80 to 90% as we begin to add stuff to our mix. And then our secondary goals, hopefully around 70, 80, 90%, somewhere in there. And then a couple other things real quick. here's the C to N ratio bar, and it's the carbon to nitrogen ratio. And for the sake of time, I might not get into this too much, but we can always talk about this at a different time or reach out to me. But this is a helpful tool to kind of calculate our mixes as well. But more importantly, I feel like understanding the full rate bar right here. And so there's quite a bit of ways to think about planting rates, especially with diverse cover crop mixes, whether that's pounds per acre or bushels per acre or even seeds per acre. So what we've kind of decided to do with our calculator here is a percentage of full rate is what we call it. So for example, if you had just oats and a standard full rate of oats by themselves was like 100 pounds, and that's kind of a high rate for oats, but for example, oats was 100 pounds, and you put in 50 pounds of oats per acre, you would have a 50% full rate, right? Because 50 is half of 100, that's 50% of 100. So you'd have a 50% full rate, but then if you added 5 pounds of radishes, where the full rate for radishes was 10 pounds, you'd have another 50% full rate of the radishes, right? Because 5 is half of 10, so 50% of 10. So you would have the 50 pounds of oats and the 5 pounds of radishes for 55 pounds per acre, but you would have 100% full rate here, because that's what this bar is doing, is kind of adding up the full percentages of full rates of each individual species and combining them here. Sorry if that was confusing. I probably made that more confusing than it actually is. But hopefully that's kind of an understanding, and we'll look at the full rates here in a little bit after we add some species. So we'll look at these numbers too in a second. So let's get in and add some species here with the plus sign. And once you pull up that, it brings up 4 different categories: legumes, grasses, brassicas, and broadleaves. And then over here, it also brings up 4 different categories of how the calculator ranked these based on what we talked about with the geography, the rainfall and everything like that, and our goals, and in our next cash crop and different things like that too. And so there's excellent, and then good, and then even marginal. I wouldn't be afraid to add 1 or 2 things from that in a mix, depending on kind of what I think about a certain species. This calculator is not a perfect system. It's not infallible. And so it's certainly a great place to start. And I do think most of the things we'll add are in the excellent category. But don't be afraid if you have seen something in your area that's only in the good or even marginal, to try that in the mix too. But for legumes, we'll just add some here, and we can always edit these as well. But I think common veg would be a good one. Definitely want some spring forage peas in our spring grazing mix. And then maybe you're scrolling down here, like I said, and you don't see, maybe you had crimson clover in mind. You don't see that here. So maybe that's in the good category. So you can click on good, and scroll down, and maybe actually another way to search is you can just type in clover. Okay, now it brings up all the clovers in the good category, and I'll just click on crimson because that's one that I wanted to get, for example. And then for grasses, we'll move back up to the excellent category and maybe simply just do some spring oats and spring barley. And then for some brassicas, maybe 2 brassicas, collards, and turnips. And then for broadleaves, we might do safflower, which is a warm season broadleaf, and it tells you that right here. I hope you can see that. It's kind of in small lettering, but it's WS-B. So warm season is what that stands for. And all the other ones that I've added so far are cool season, or CS. And then -B is a broadleaf, and all these are broadleaves except the grasses. That's just distinguishing if it's a grass type plant or a broadleaf type plant. So the reason I'm adding safflower, even though it's a warm season for our early spring mix, is because I think safflower has a little bit better cold tolerance than some of these other warm season species. And that's probably why it's still ranked in excellent. So I'm going to add safflower and then maybe 1 other broadleaf, but I'll look and see maybe what's in the good category. So maybe I'll add some flax as a cool season broadleaf as well. Not necessarily for grazing, but it's a good one to have in for soil building and lasting residue and things like that. So not everything has to be perfect for your primary goal. That's why everything's working together. So let's click on those 9 species that we added, and we can see right away that our supplemental grazing's at 90%, our organic matter is 70, and weed suppression's at 80. So we might tweak that and change it a little bit, but that's a pretty good start. And then over here on our summary box, we can see that we have $23 per acre, almost 1,800 pounds total in our mix for about 35 pounds per acre. And then back to that full rate down here, everything's at 14%. And there's 9 species. So 14 times 9 is 126. So hopefully we don't have to get into any crazier math than that. But that would be 126% full rate. So all the full rates are the same. All the pounds per acre are different because all of the full rates are different. So I hope I haven't confused you too much this morning. I'm about to confuse myself if I keep talking. So all these pounds per acres are different, and we can't edit them until we go up here to the SmartMix auto adjust button and turn that off. So I feel like there's something I wanted to mention before that, but we'll go ahead and click SmartMix auto adjust button off, and it leaves everything how it was, but now I can get in here and kind of update these. And so common vetch, I don't know, sometimes I like to just change these to even pounds. It's not upgrading it too much, but just adding 2 pounds of clover, and I actually want to do 7 pounds of peas, something like that. But then I really want to increase the oats and barley a little bit. So do 12 pounds of oats and 12 pounds of spring barley. And now you can see it changed our goals progress a little bit. I think it changed organic matter up to 80%. It's also added a little bit of cost, but we're okay with that for now. And then also increased the full rate to almost 140%. And so we can keep going here real quickly. The collards, we can do 1 pound. And the turnips, for now, we'll do 1 pound. And we'll do 1 pound of the safflower and just 3 pounds of flax. So you don't have to get everything even like I just did, but that's just kind of what I like to do to get things kind of a cleaner look. And so now we have 146% full rate, got 100% grazing, and then we're back down to 70 for whatever reason with organic matter. Whether that's because I took the safflower down a little bit, or I'm not sure where that happened at. And so now we kind of can look at this and be like, okay, I can deal with this mix, but maybe you have a question about, I don't know if I want purple top turnips in our mix. Well, you can hover over any of these species, little info circle here, and click on learn more. And so for turnips, we can click on learn more, and it will take you back to the Green Cover Seed website and the product page. So you can look at a picture of turnips here, and then you can look at some info about it, some of these drop-down menus of advantages and disadvantages and such. And so maybe you decide, actually, I don't want turnips. We can click on this X button here to get that out of there. And so now it's removed from our mix. And so now we're back down to 124% full rate here. But now we kind of have the freedom to add another species or add 2 current species that we have in there. So maybe I'll add a 1/2 pound since we took 1 pound out of turnips, and then maybe another pound added to safflower. And so now we have 138% full rate, still around $26, $27 per acre. Our grazing's at 100%, organic matter's back up to 80%, and so is weed suppression. And so we could spend a lot of time in here just messing around, taking things in, adding things back out, and different things like that. But for the sake of time, we can kind of move on here. But that's kind of how the SmartMix works in step 2 with adding different species. And now we can see we have 2,100 pounds of total seed and 42 pounds per acre. And then something we just added recently is the mix density. So it tells you that this mix combined is 48 pounds per bushel, which can help calibrate the drill sometimes. So now in step 3 is just the shipping page. And so if you need it shipped to you, click on ship to me, and then you can add a new address or use the address that you have on hand. And so mine's currently in Jackson, Mississippi. And so then we can click continue. And step 4 is just a summary page of what we've done already. So under here, under details, is everything that we've done in step 1. And then over here is all the species that we added in step 2. So this is kind of our mix that we've already seen a rundown of with the price and everything. And I should mention that this is an estimated cost of the seed and the mixing and the bagging that I mentioned, and the inoculant. And then it's everything included, all of that except for shipping. And so if you click on confirm and complete, nothing is finalized, but it does go to us, you know, myself or somebody else at Green Cover Seed to submit for review is essentially what you would be doing. And we would follow up with an email or a phone call with a shipping quote and see if you have any questions. And if you do already have some questions, you can enter that, say, you know, get a shipping quote, and if you have any recommendations, that'd be great. I'm new to cover crops, or whatever you might have some questions on, and so you can submit that as well. And so now that's kind of the end of the SmartMix flow, and you can confirm and complete like we just talked about, or you can save for later and kind of come back to it and keep looking at it a little bit too. So I hope that kind of was a quick rundown of SmartMix. Might have some time for some questions, but I hope that was educational for you and helpful to kind of be able to design a smart mix.
Very cool. Thank you, Jakin. Oh my gosh, you could spend a lot of time on this website. This is very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. We are kind of running low on time, but we could probably take a question if anybody has. It looks like Jason just typed in a question here for you, Jakin. What is the logic behind the algorithm that determines the initial ratio of seed species relative to each other? Is it simply a target of equal seeds per acre between the species?
Let's see. Trying to understand that a little bit. Yeah, that's one thing to be careful of if I'm understanding it right, because it does not, let me take us back to step 2. Over here, the legumes by seeds is 23% versus the grasses. So that's kind of a fairly even rundown, but the full rate, legumes are actually 40, almost half. There's not really a way that the SmartMix right now does that. And so there's nothing really telling you, hey, you should balance out your legumes, grasses, and broadleaves. It's just equally doing each species. And so there's not really a target of difference. I think I answered that. I'm not sure if I was misunderstanding that a little bit. But that is something to be careful about, is kind of balancing out the categories of the species. But it's just kind of doing it equal full rates to kind of add up to the target full rate there.
Nice.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we probably are getting at our end of our time here. If you do have further questions for Jakin, we have his contact information on our website. He's offered to be a resource for us, for folks in the area. So please reach out to him, and if you have any further questions. Jakin, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. It was very cool. So.
You bet. Thank you.
All right. And just to wrap up our morning, thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. As a thank you, we have a few items to raffle off. So Green Cover has donated a $50 gift certificate, and our winner for that is Ian Clark. And then Plants of the Wild has also raffled off $50 gift certificate, and the winner for that is Amanda Richardson. So we will be emailing those gift certificates off to you shortly, so look for those in your email. Coming up, we will have our talk in December, our next talk in December. So please keep an eye on our website for more details to come, happening at the same time, the third Wednesday of the month. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We will be sending out a survey at the end of this, so we would greatly appreciate you taking the time to provide us some valuable feedback on what topics you would like to hear more about and how we can make improvements for next time. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.